now fled. They think they've gone over to the Taliban and are now in hiding, and they are treating this as an insider attack.
I found this chart to be a really interesting chart. You know, it's basically from the Department of Health and Human Services, and it's a breakdown in segments of millions as far as how many people were born in different periods of our generations. The silent generation, the boomer, baby boomer generation, Generation X, millennials, and post-millennials. And what I found interesting about this isn't the number of people being born as much as it is the way the Department of Health and Human Services segmented the different groups of generations. How did they do it? Why did they decide that from, say, the crash, the Depression, through the end of World War II was a good time to shift from the silent generation to the boomer? And you could probably say, well, because look at the growth in birth rates, you know, because of all the veterans of World War II coming home. Okay, but why did we go from baby boomers to Generation X? Is that because the number of births went down? Okay, I guess I'll stop again. Something I noticed about this graph that's not listed on the graph. This is about interest in truth and not lies. Pink is targeted for propaganda. And then this one is media influence, the gray. And these right here is a birth rate. Okay, this comes from the Department of Health and Human Services, population-wise in millions. You know, like here's 4 million, here's 3.5 million, so forth. And then these segments right here are the different generations. The silent generation, which was after the Roaring 20s up to World War II. The boomer generation after World War II up until some other events occurred, like the assassination of Martin Luther King, the Vietnam War, assassination of Kennedy. And over here is in 81 is the millennial generation, and that is basically the introduction of computers into the public domain, because prior to that computers were mostly just big commercial environments and government, and no home computers like the TRS-80 or the desktop computer. All those things kicked in here. And then in the millennial generation or post-millennial generation, you have 9/11, basically, and the beginning of a religious war going on out in here. So what I noticed about it is these are all paradigm shifts, man. That's what they really are. It's more, it wasn't just an arbitrary thing to decide a new generation in for the baby boomers. It's based upon paradigm shifts. It's got to be, because these are all major paradigm shifts, the different segments here. And the bars, if you look at the yellow, which is people that are interested in truth and not lies, but yet are they targeted for propaganda, and how well is the media doing? And if you notice with our kids, our young kids, man, it's like off the charts as far as their interest in truth is up here. The millennials, they're sort of interested. The baby boomer, they were kind of content of being out of the war. Generation X seems to be the lowest of all. One, two, three. And a 1, 2. Wait, what? Okay, so what I find interesting about this graph, this is births underlying each generation, made by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And so they box these in as far as different generations within, 100 years or some period of time. And it's based on population growth. Here's 3 million, here's 4 million for the baby boomers, and it drops back down again to 3 million during Generation X, and then it bumps back up again for the millennials to slightly over 4 million, and then here's the kids, post-millennium. What I found interesting about this graph, though, is why did they choose these periods of time to determine a new generation? Is it because of the population shift, or is it because of the paradigm shift? Because if you think about it, the paradigm shift for the silent generation was from, say, the crash of 1929 or whatever, the Depression, up until the time of the end of World War II, at which time all the soldiers came home and they all got married and had a bunch of kids. And then in 1965, or around this era, was a paradigm shift that occurred, and it was Generation X. And Generation X is where you had the Vietnam War kicking in, the assassination of Martin Luther King, and the assassination of President Kennedy, and so forth. And the civil rights movement come all the way through here up until 1981. Right around the 80s is when the millennial generation kicked in. Consequently, a paradigm shift occurred also, which was the introduction of the computers and the introduction of the internet to public domain. Because prior to that, the internet was really only used by military and research and government. Back here in these days, you had Unix running the internet. And then out here it was introduced to the world along with the desktop computer, which could manage the internet for us. And during the millennial generation, we come along into 1998. Shortly thereafter was 9/11 and the beginning of a religious war, or escalation of a religious war between Muslims and the rest of the world. And that's basically where we're at now. So the segments that I see are really based on paradigm shifts. A paradigm shift is either good or bad. It just is. It's not one way or the other. Like when slavery was abolished in America, that was a paradigm shift, and it was it created bigots, and bigots are either good or bad. In the case of the slavery back here, sometime a bigot was someone who resisted the notion that slaves should be free. But then these other paradigm shifts, they also create bigots, but that doesn't make a bigot bad. It only makes a bigot oppose the paradigm shift, because you could have bad paradigm shifts as well as good paradigm shifts. At any rate, this is what I get out of this. And then these colored bars on here is interest in truth, and the pink one is targeted for propaganda, and the gray one is the media influence, or how effective are they at implementing propaganda against the generation who's experienced the paradigm shift. Because basically paradigm shifts are an interesting factor. Look here, yellow for interest in truth, and this one is targeted for propaganda, and this one is the effectiveness of the media. Basically they just had what, newspapers and word of mouth down here, radio. And then in the baby boomer generation, it actually drops a little bit. They're just figuring out how to use propaganda. They're figuring out how to manipulate people. In Generation X, we drop a little bit of interest in truth or in spiritual things, and the propaganda is getting better, and so is the media at promoting neuro-linguistic programming or propaganda against people. And then in the millennial generation, there's more interest in truth, but the propaganda and the overwhelming effect of media has gone way up, almost to the entire generation. And then you look at our kids, the young kids, you know, 20 years old and younger or whatever. They're very interested in truth. Almost all of them are interested in truth. But we're not giving it to them. We, the older generations back here, we're not giving the millennials what they need. Look at the effectiveness of propaganda and the effectiveness of the media in pushing that propaganda. So my question is, what's the next generation going to do? What is the next paradigm shift coming out over here? There is a significant event going to happen pretty soon, in my opinion, about all of this. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I think. That's me over here. I'm just sitting here rattling on. See you later.